Hello, friends. English Literature Introduction to Poetry Home Burial by Robert Frost. Short questions with answers. Question 1. Describe the conflict between the husband and wife over the home burial of their son. Answer. The poem Home Burial is an intensely tragic poem about the impact that the death of a first child has on extremely sensitive parents. The conflict between the couple is their inability to communicate with one another. Both characters are mourning the loss of their child, but in different manners, and neither one is able to understand the way their partner mourns. The wife outwardly expresses her feelings and emotions of grief, but the man has no outward expression of grief. She resents her husband deeply for his controlled composure. She sees it as his hard-heartedness. The husband has accepted that death as a natural order of life. He is also intensely grief-stricken, but the outward indication of his grief were quite different from those of his wife. To the husband, it seems right to dig a grave in their family graveyard with his own hands. It is simply beyond the wife's comprehension as to how a father can dig the grave of his own child. With this, she associates utter heartlessness. Each of them fails to understand each other, though both of them suffer from agony. The husband wants that his wife should understand his feelings and should express her feelings in such a way that he can understand this, but he fails to convince her. As a result, the conflict remains unresolved. Question 2. What is the predicament of the husband? Answer. The poem Home Burial presents a conflict between a couple which has created a predicament for the husband. The predicament of the husband results from the death of his child. The husband, as a father, is sorrowful, but the external indication of his sorrow are quite different from those of his wife. He does not outwardly express his intense feelings and emotions of grief, but it is real. He has reserved his feelings and emotions. He continues to perform relevant duties and daily routine activities, and as a farmer, he digs the grave of his child in their family graveyard with his own hands. His actions create sheer hatred in his wife. She considers it as utter coldness and indifference about the loss of the child. She thinks that her husband has no soft feelings and emotions for her child. He is an emotionless father. The husband tries to make her understand his feelings for the loss and the fact that life must go on and people need to accept the reality to live on. But she is not willing to listen to any word, and she decides to leave him. So this is the predicament of the husband. Question 3. How do you see the emotional crisis the woman is going through? Answer. The woman in the poem Home Burial has been presented as an extremely sensitive mother who is entirely broken-hearted at the death of her first child. She can neither accept it nor bear it. She has reached the point of mental breakdown. Her husband's loving arms cannot change her mood. The husband is also intensely agonized, but he reserves his emotion. He engages him in daily activities which is considered as hard-heartedness by his wife. She can neither understand her husband nor she can accept it. She can neither forget the dead nor forgive the living. She is hateful to her husband and to the humankind and tries to withdraw herself from human touch. She thinks that the people of the world are evil because they forget the memory of the dead very soon. However, the woman's excessive emotion is destructive. Her obsession with grief has caused psychological disorder, which is not only affecting her but also her husband. She has not only ruined her peace but also has ruined the peace of her husband. Question 4. How is the poem Home Burial a dramatic lyric? Answer. Home Burial is a dramatic lyric. Dramatic in the sense that, like traditional drama, it presents a continuous scene and employs primarily dialogue rather than narrative or description. It is a dramatic lyric in the form of a dialogue between two personae. The characters are Amy and her husband. It is dramatic too in its subject matter. The form fits content well. In this poem, two actors are seen on a stage portraying this brief emotional scene. The couple exchange some angry dialogues through their conversations. We can understand the central issue around which they are fighting, the death of their first child. The first line of the poem shows that the husband is located at the bottom of the stairs and his wife is staring at the window from the top of the stairs. She becomes hysterical after watching sight of the first of the child's grave through the window, and more so when her husband doesn't immediately recognize the cause of her extreme grief. It is simply beyond the wife's comprehension as to how a father can dig the grave of his own child. She takes this as an utter heartlessness and absence of any soft feelings. She decides to separate herself from him and tries to leave the house. She opens the door to leave as he calls after him. Rhythmically, first approaches pure speech. Some lines sound as prosaic as anything. Question 5. There you have said it all and you feel better. Explain with reference to the context. Answer. This line occurs in the poem Home Burial written by Robert Frost. These words are uttered by the husband to his wife, who has become hysterical out of utter grief at the death of her first child. She cannot accept the loss of her baby. She hates her husband because he has dug the grave of his child with his own hands. She considers it as utter coldness and indifference to the loss of the child. She thinks that her husband has a callous father. I repeat it. She thinks that her husband is a callous father. She thinks that the people of the world are evil and devoid of feeling because they quickly forget the dead and engage them in worldly affairs. This is completely inhuman to her. She is totally obsessed with these thoughts, and she doesn't want to reconcile herself with her husband. The husband tries to make her understand his feelings for the loss and the fact that life must go on and they must accept the reality to live on. This is why he pleads her to share her feelings with him, because he believes that expression of feelings brings relief to a weary and burdened soul and makes the person feel lighter and better. It is only through expression and communication that there is any chance for resolution of misunderstanding and restoration of peace, harmony, and mutual goodwill. Question 6. How does the poem Home Burial portray the misunderstanding between the husband and the wife over the home burial of their son? Answer. The poem Home Burial portrays a failure of empathy and understanding between the couple. A misunderstanding occurs between them because of the lack of proper communication. The wife is completely engrossed in the thought of the death of her child. She has reached such a level of excitement that she is inconsolable, and consequently she can break down at any point. She cannot reconcile herself to the fact that she has lost her motherhood. All she knows is to reach the spot near the window from where the grave of her son is visible. Every look of the grave increases her want further, and she clings to her grief. The husband, as a male being, is reserved and composed, and he does not express his intense feeling of grief at the death of his child outwardly. The wife thinks that he is devoid of feeling. She is totally obsessed with the thought that with this thought, and she doesn't want to settle the matter with her husband. Certainly, a turmoil of grief and agony is going on inside him, but he does not express it and reserves his emotions and remains composed. He has accepted the death as the natural order of the world. The husband tries to make her understand these feelings for the loss and the fact that life must go on and people need to accept the reality to live on. Obviously, these actions do not prove that he has no feelings and emotions for his child. The wife fails to understand her husband. Question 7. Explain the following lines with reference to the context. Not you. Oh, where is my hat? Oh, I don't need it. I must get out of here. I must get here. I don't know rightly whether any man can. Answer. These lines occur in the poem Home Burial, written by the famous poet Robert Frost. These words express the woman's bewilderment at the husband's seeming callousness and insensibility. At the death of her child, the woman has become hysterical. She has reached the point of mental breakdown, but the husband has no outward expression of grief. She sees it as his hard-heartedness. To the husband, it seems right to dig a grave in their family graveyard with his own hands. She sees it as utter heartlessness. She really behaves rudely with her husband, and the husband cannot understand the reason of it. The misunderstanding between them ultimately leads to the breaking point of their conjugal life. The woman decides to leave her husband. The expressions bring out the feelings and emotions of the woman. The broken syntax in the lines beautifully express emotional agitation and psychological instability of the woman. The language is very simple and very common words are used, but they are loaded with layers of meanings, and they have tremendous capacity to express subtle shades and nuances of feelings and emotions of the characters. The use of breaks and dashes and expletives constitute a skillful rendering of conversational language and rhythm in a moment of supreme crisis. Question 8. Give a live sketch of Robert Frost. And so Robert Frost was born in San Francisco on 26 March 1874. Frost's mother was a poet. His father died when Frost was only 11 years old. They had to settle down in Salem in New Hampshire. Frost's mother took up a teaching job. Frost joined Dartmouth College in 1892. His first poem, My Butterfly, was published in New York Independent in 1894, and soon afterwards 6 of his poems were published in Twilight. Frost married his schoolmate Eleanor White in 1895 and desired to settle down as a school teacher. He spent 2 years as a student at Harvard College preparing for college teaching. Then he tried poultry farming. In 1906, he had a severe attack of pneumonia. Then he again turned to writing poetry, but ultimately settled back into school teaching. In 1912, he left for England with his family and settled in Beaconsfield, Buckinghamshire. He published a volume of his poems called A Boy's Will in 1913 and got immediate recognition. Frost returned to America in 1915 and bought a small farm in Franconia, New England. He bought some more farms in Vermont and Florida. But his poetic career was given honor. He got membership in American Academy. He was invited to recite his poem, The Gift, outright at the inauguration of President Kennedy. He died in January 1963. Question 9. Give a short account of the poetical works of Robert Frost. Answer. The volume of poems by Robert Frost was A Boy's Will, published in 1913. The theme of the poems of this volume are nostalgia, stoicism, a feeling of unity with the country objects. North of Boston was published in 1914. Here Frost exhibits his power of dramatic lyric. The themes are mostly people of different types and their peculiar psychology. The next volume, called Mountain Interval, was published in 1916. The volume contains reflective poems, love lyrics, and description of natural objects that man is faced with in his everyday work. New Hampshire was published in 1923. It contains some of his best poems on country things and people. West Running Book of 1928 contains poems showing man's conflict with nature. Then A Farther Range was published in 1936. The poems exhibit his tendency to exhortation and so are not much in favor with the critics. Afterwards, he published A Witness Tree, 1942, A Mask of Reason, 1945, A Mask of Mercy, 1947. 1962 saw the publication of The Clearing, which enjoyed most popularity in America. It contains the last clarification of his beliefs, his ripe wisdom. Question 10. Give an idea of Frost's theory of poetry, or what is Frost's concept of poetry. Give a brief account of it. Answer. Frost considered poetry as words that have become deeds. Though he had no rigid definition of poetry. In his essay, The Figure a Poem Makes, he puts forward his ideas on poetry, which are creation, elastic principle. He felt that originality and initiative should be embodied in poetry to give it an everlasting freshness, the surprise of remembering something I did not know I knew. He regarded content and form of poetry as equally important. He wanted poetry to be neither as pure art nor as pure exhortation, but a mixture of the two. He held the view that the virtue of poetry lay in the mixture of heterogeneous elements, both subjective and objective. When such heterogeneous elements are artfully fused together, good poetry is produced. He thought that poetry begins in delight and ends in a clarification of life, not necessarily a great clarification, such as sects and cultures are founded on, but a momentary stay against confusion. Frost did not undermine the spontaneity in poetry. He regarded it as a serious art form requiring conscious craftsmanship. It should be the poet's pleasure to discover words, images, metaphors, and phrases inherent in the emotion, thought, and situation. Thank you, friends, for watching my video.